I'm going to stand down here so I can see the TV. So if I'm talking, like if I was talking about a fish right now, and there was a picture of a Bible, it wouldn't make any sense. You know, the Bible is a miracle. I'm sorry if that's news to you. It's just absolutely miraculous. And the deeper you go, the farther you go into seeing exactly how it's arranged and what it took to get it to where we are today, that we still have it, is a miracle. It's just such an amazing thing. And that's just an aside. We're going to talk about what happens after desire. Because we spent 3 weeks on desire. We spent first week talking about God's desire to be with you. Then we talked about human desire and how that is actually fed to us. We don't organically come up with desires. And we talked about the adversary, or Satan's desire, which is to steal, kill, and destroy. But you have these desires competing. What do you do after that? And humans are fed desires. Desires produce thoughts. Thoughts influence behaviors. Behaviors determine relationships. Relationships determine your life. The ones you choose or not choose. And you can break in at any moment and make choices that go against your desires. You can make choices that aren't cognitive in your mind in terms of thoughts. Even though you think one thing, you do another. You can influence your behaviors if you decide not to pursue a behavior. And that will, of course, affect relationships. And relationships are your life. And so, we're on that path. So we're going to think about thoughts mostly today. So God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. 1 Timothy, the spirit that you have in you that is fighting the world's spirits of the spiritual. Remember Galatians 5:17? You have these two spiritual forces inside of you fighting against each other. The spirit that God has given you is not timid. You're not afraid. You don't shrink under desires that are overwhelming. You fight them. You fight them because you have the spirit of power, love, and self-control. And the reason, the promise of self-control in your life is something that spurs you on, that you can actually defeat the desires that the world has given you to go awry. Did you ever see Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the movie? I did. 1941 last night. Brilliant movie. Robert Louis Stevenson, I think, wrote it. It's beautiful. It's a guy who wants to sample the other side. He knows that this demon is in him, and he figures out a potion that releases that into the world. And he's really happy when he does. He feels like he's free. But by the end of the movie, he realizes it's a trap. And he actually can't control it. He thinks he can control it, and he can't control it. And that's the danger of walking away from the spirits and the desires that God gives you, is that you can't find your way back. And that's not a salvific thing like, oh, you'll burn in hell. The Bible doesn't say that. What it is, it's your life. It's the people you love. What he wound up doing, Mr. Hyde, was killing the people he loved because he couldn't control it. It was a pretty good movie, actually. So today we're talking about civilian affairs in terms of channeling desire. Because you have the decision how you channel your desires into the world. How others will see you and how others will react to you, how you'll react to the world. You have that choice. And civilian affairs comes from 1 Timothy. Paul is writing to his son, who is the pastor in Ephesus. It's Paul's last letter in 2 Timothy. He's about to be beheaded, and he's writing this one last letter to Timothy. And one of the lines in there is, endure suffering along with me, Timothy, as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. Soldiers don't get tied up in the affairs of civilian life. And so, of course, you have to process, because we all live civilian lives. You know, we all have to pay taxes. We have to go to Walmart or Meijer or Aldi's or Kroger or wherever you decide to go, unless you grow your own food, one of those rare people. Otherwise, you go to JC, something like that. And so we all have to put gas in our cars. We all got a phone, these electronic leashes that are so awesome. And so we participate in civilian life. So you have to really nuance, what is he telling Timothy? Soldiers don't get tied up in the affairs of civilian life. You live a civilian life. You're a civilian. And the thought of there being two kingdoms is what is compelling, because it says somewhere that we've been transferred from one kingdom to another. So the king of the world and the values of the world are something we're not going to satisfy, because the danger is we start to satisfy one king when we're allegiant to another king. And that is what? Dissonance in your brain, whatever it's called, where you do one thing and you say one thing and you do another. Which is uncomfortable for me because I do it all the time. But you know what I mean? It's okay to temper what you say, but you really don't want your heart to be set in one thing and you think you're going that way, like Dr. Jekyll thought he could control Mr. Hyde. But the reality is the longer you're in a dissonant state, that it will become your normal state. You'll forever be locked in this thing, thinking that what you say and what you do aren't related. And the officer who enlisted them, of course, is Jesus and God. It's hard to please God if you're not working for him, is what I think Paul is getting at here. And he's taking the line of a soldier. Next week it'll be an athlete, and the week after that it'll be a farmer. All different things relating to different cultures, Roman, Greek, and Jewish. But for our standards, it's just, what is a soldier like? If I'm in Israel right now and I'm a soldier and we've been attacked and I go away from my home, I ain't going to be worrying about washing the car. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you don't wash the car, because this is all this talk is about what's going on in your mind and your heart. Civilian life has nothing to do with what you do behaviorally. Civilian life is how you think. Does that make sense? Because we automatically think of behaviors. Well, maybe I'll do this. Maybe to please God, I won't cook as much, or I won't wash my car. And because I don't want to be part of civilian life. And that's not what it's about at all. It's how you think. What you think about. And that's always the call. This dude, there's one real war that we would associate with this guy, and there's one fake war. He's participating now in the real war. And if you read Ephesians 6, he's all garbed up. He has his helmet, probably has some bulletproof stuff on. He has his gun, boots, the whole thing that Paul talks about in Ephesians 6, how we're supposed to participate in life as soldiers of God. To think to understand that your heart and your mind are under attack as believers in Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, then shoot, go. Eat, drink, and be merry, as Paul says. Doesn't matter. But if you claim to believe in Jesus, then Paul's saying, well, this is stuff you should think about. Because this is the real war. This is the war that all of us, me, have the hardest time participating in the real war, which is to put yourself away and pray. To go into the closet fully armed, fully ready, knowing that you're under assault. And to go into the reality of who you really are according to Jesus. According to Jesus. That's the hardest thing to do, because life is so dang busy. And I'm wondering who makes it busy. Who makes it busy? And that's, again, this is not to convict. This is so you start to think and you start to see what the Bible is telling you about the world that you live in if you follow Jesus. And that's always the parenthetical. If you don't follow Jesus, if you're just checking the box here to go to church, then that's great. You've checked the box. You get to listen to me. Hoo-hoo. But the reality is, if you've decided intentionally to make a decision to follow Jesus, then this is what life is like, Paul is saying to Timothy. We've been given a spirit that is not timid, not timid. That doesn't mean you go around just, beating everybody up. That means when you hear a false argument, it's like, no, dude. I don't care how many spotlights you got on you. I don't care how smooth your argument is. Not going to happen in my brain. Shut it down. Shut it down in your brain, in your heart. Don't get tempted. You know what I mean? And here we go. This is what Paul says at the end of the whole thing. He goes, you know what, Timothy, if you don't get this whole soldier analogy, think about what I'm saying. The Lord will help you understand all of these things. And this is what's going to happen as you follow Jesus, is you're going to be asked, and read the Bible, you're going to be asked to think. Think about these sayings. These are not Pop-Tart, wisdom things, where you put it in a toaster, 10 minutes later you got your meal. This is a lifetime. This is a lifetime. This is thinking about who you say you are. And then pursuing that powerfully and without being timid. And this is what Paul is saying. Because it does make sense, right? How can I not participate in a civilian life when I'm a civilian? What does that even mean? Well, no one's going to answer that real quick, because if you do, I'm going to know you're lying. It takes a long time, and I think we all know that. The Bible was designed for a lifetime of spiritual food. Romans 12:2 is a famous one, right? Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world. Why? Because it'll influence the way you think. But let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. What's being inferenced here is that the where you are right now is not good. Where you will be in 10 years from now after thinking is still not good, because you only live today. 10 years from now, guess what day it is? It's today again. And you're reading this again. And you're going, and you see, let God transform you. What does that say? Does God transform you? Or do you let God transform you? Let God. The inference being that you can fight against God. We have two desires in our minds, fed by our hearts, the desires of the world, the desires of God. You let God transform you. You give yourself over to God so that He can transform you. Without guarantees. Without guarantees. As a soldier would to a general. I am signing up for this war because I believe in this cause. Send me where I need to go based on your best knowledge of who I am. Send me to whatever front you think I will be most valuable. But a lot of us, as we saw in Pink Floyd, right? We exchange our walk-on part in the war, because you walk on, you're killed, you walk off. And we look for a lead role in a cage where we know it's safe, where we know it's long, where we know it's pleasurable. Because I don't want to let anybody else transform me. I'm going to transform myself based on how I want people to perceive me against the world's values, so I look and think good according to what the world says. And what Paul is saying is that is illogical thinking if you follow Jesus. You're following the world. And I've already established that there is the world and there is Jesus, and they are not compatible. John says if you love the world, you don't love God. I mean, John is pretty hardcore, cut to the chase. And so you think, your thoughts come from your desires. And so you can begin to analyze, well, I do this, so what's my desire? What's my desire? Does that fit into what God wants? So you read this again, endure suffering in me as a good soldier of Christ. Soldiers don't get tied up in civilian life. And the word tied up there in the Greek means tangled up. Means tangled up. Like this, and he's alive. No PETA calls, or see, there's his eye. He's very sad because he's supposed to be in the ocean. He's smart enough to know that he's not in the ocean, and he's been tangled up by those banners and those colorful whatever things. That's what Paul is saying. Don't let the world's values and pleasures and whatever else tangle you up to the point where you are no longer in the ocean, close to the ocean, but you're laying there on the sand, dead. This fish is not dead. He will be saved because there's a photographer there. It's not like, he's going to save him, I'm hoping. But for all intents and purposes, he's dead. He's not breathing what he's supposed to be breathing. He's not living the life that he was designed to live by God. He is tangled up. And it's this is around his body. But the mental picture is that your mind gets tangled up with things that don't matter. That's what James says. He says, what's causing all the fights and the quarrels among you? Isn't it the conflict in your heart? Isn't that what's driving you? Your need to be right. Your need to be beautiful. Your need to be thought smart. Your need to be in control. Whatever need that you have. Isn't that what's driving you? Isn't that what's causing conflict, world, humanity? Be a soldier for Jesus, he's saying. Endure the suffering. You're going to, you get the battlefront over there in Siberia. No. Why didn't I get Hawaii? Because that's what getting tangled up does. That's what he's saying. Don't get tangled up where Jesus tells you to go here and you just go, no way. We've never done that before. I've never been there before. I can't go there. I can't do that. It's too hard. This is too much fun. You created me so that I can have fun, right, Jesus? I know you died on a cross, but I'm going to go party. It's all about me. It's all about me. That is a worldly philosophy. It's Epicureanism. If you want to look it up, it was something Paul fought back in the day. It's too long to go into now. Because even though we live in the world, we don't wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not weapons of the world. There's nothing in this world that you can fight with in this spiritual battle. Nothing. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. The weapons we fight actually are effective. They actually have divine power. And strongholds are something that exists in your heart that Satan has dug out, and he sits in there, and he tempts you, and he ruins your relationships, and he makes you weak. That's what Paul's trying to tell Timothy. And what do we do in this war? We demolish arguments and every pretension. I don't know what pretension is, but I know it's a lie of some sort. But I just like pretension. Like if you tell this lie, it's your leads. Next up is tension. That sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Every argument that sets itself up against God, we take captive every thought. Not anybody else's thought, your thought. Who cares what they think? It's you and your anger and your frustration and your willingness to walk away from Jesus and not be a soldier. The thoughts and the arguments and the temptations are inside of you. Coming up. According to the Bible. According to the Bible, according to Paul. They're inside of you. You capture, by following Jesus, every thought that sets itself up against Jesus. Every thought. And of course that's impossible, because, especially if you're me, how many random thoughts do I get a day? Billion. Which one do you choose to do? Billion. Every thought, and make it obedient to Jesus. Every thought. It affects relationships. These desires to follow the world with all its stuff. It sets up thoughts that affect your behavior, that affect your relationships. Affect your relationship with God at the very top. See, and the heaviest burdens that we carry are the thoughts in our head. That's what some artist came up with that. Absolutely true. You ever see something that is stale and stagnant and doesn't grow and doesn't move is dead? Basically, that's it. We get thoughts in our head. We're not valuable enough. Who would tell you you're not valuable enough? Satan. The reality is you're not valuable enough to go after what the world says you have to go after. But to be a child of God, Jesus died so that you could be a child of God, so that you could follow him. I have life, everlasting life. I am here to give you an abundant life. Can you walk away from trying to fulfill your own desires, which lead away from me and lead other people away from me? Can you trust me, is what Jesus is saying. I will direct your life. And that's the tree. The two trees in the garden, remember, of Eden? One was the knowledge of good and evil, which means I decide what's right for me. And the other was the tree of life, where God decides what is right for me. Neither the two shall ever be at the same party. And this is what happens. You get so bogged down in your thoughts. I'm bad. I'm unlovable. I need to prove how good I am. I need to accumulate material things. I need to do this. There's a deficit in me. I need to tell everybody what they should think. You wind up just sitting in place until you rot away and die. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's your thoughts. And you have a choice. That's what's beautiful. You have a choice. And that's the dignity of what God has given us. God could, produce robots like snapping. But he doesn't want robots. He wants people who will choose him, who will become soldiers in his army, to keep the metaphor rolling, who have decided they're going to follow Jesus, who are going to trip, and they're going to fall, and they're going to get bruised, and they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to get up every single time, and they're going to follow Jesus. That's all it is. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to memorize the whole Bible. You don't have to be anything. You just start. You just start and you say, I'm making a choice. The Spirit I've given is not timid. It is loving. It is powerful. I'm making a choice. And it has the divine power to start killing off strongholds in your heart and your mind. And then you begin to see there's two separate, there's one with one voice, and then there's another desire with a billion voices. And you begin to check that out. And that's the civilian affairs. There are things that are important, and there are things we just got to do to survive. But we never judge anybody else just by the things we have to do to survive. We judge people by what Jesus thought of them, how he affects us. And we don't listen to anybody else in terms of your relationship with Jesus. It's your relationship with Jesus. It's your choice to follow the desires in your heart to get to whatever destination you're trying to get to. That's what the Bible's saying about being a soldier. That's what Paul was saying. That was the last slide. We're going to sing a song. Thank you. Read my mind. Number 378. I'm going to turn this guy off.